All right. Well, thank you for being able to make it. Uh, you can get through these. So for starters, I really enjoyed a lot of the stuff I've listened to so far. I was a big audiobook guy when I was a kid, but I got more into audio dramas over time. So my first question was, what made you interested in audio dramas, and what do you think makes them effectively stand apart from like movies, television, books, and other mediums? I'll wait for you to get
Yeah,
situated.
hold on one second. I'm just gonna move to a better
Oh
better
yeah, that's fine.
spot
Yeah.
for the internet because
No, yeah, it gets
give me
complicated.
give me 2 seconds to grab my. I'll be right there. I'll be right there. Okay, sorry, I'm back. So
Yeah, no
why
problem.
did I get into audio drama? Was
Yeah,
the
I was wondering if
question?
there's anything you
Um,
makes. Sorry, go ahead.
there's yeah, there's two ways to respond to that. One is I um the short version of my background career wise is I went to art school, studied painting, started playing. I'd already been playing music and playing in bands. When I graduated from art school, the band I was in was doing pretty well, so I wound up pursuing that, which led to a career in music, and spent most of my really all of my career in and out of studios, right? So I produced a lot. I engineered a lot. I played a lot. Got signed and dropped and signed and dropped kind of over and over again. Um, really living the life of an indie musician. And I love the studio. Like, I love microphones. I love all forms of recording audio. And I'm obsessive about it. Like, I know all the microphones and all the different ways that recording techniques work and what sounds better than what on what and why and so I had this facility with the gear and a love for capturing a great moment from my work in music. Then I wound up working on, after a while, music became free because of Napster at first and then later Spotify. And so it became really hard for any musicians to make a living. I wound up getting into music for television commercials. So, first as a composer, later as a creative director. And, I was sort of in love with making money. That was really cool.
Fair enough.
But I hated working in the advertising space, and it really was killing me. And I didn't realize how unhappy I was doing it. Um, because if you're having some sort of success, like I was working on Super Bowl commercials and stuff, and so I thought, oh, I must be doing well, but I was miserable. And then right around the pandemic, just a couple years before the pandemic, I turned to my wife, who is a producer and a writer in the film and TV space, and said, what I really want to do is audio fiction. Like, that's what I listen to, it's what I love. I know I could do a better job than so many things that I hear because of my background in the studio and how much I pay attention to that stuff. But I don't know anything about story. And she was like, well, that's kind of what I do for a living, is story. So we kind of put those two skill sets together, and she reached out to a few people in her network, and pretty soon we worked on a couple of episodes of Dust, and then that turned into a whole season of Dust, and then that turned into us kind of becoming this little boutique studio for really high-end production, and we wound up working with Blumhouse and Shondaland and Warner Brothers and DC, off of that.
Yeah, that's all really cool. I was wondering if you think there's anything in particular that makes audio drama stand apart from other like mediums. Like, what do you think the benefit of it as opposed to like movies, books, whatnot? Because it's a very unique like medium.
Well, there's a few things that I think are really cool about it. To be honest, the thing about it that worked for me in the situation I was in, I listened to a lot of audio drama. It's something that I genuinely love. And B, because I had a certain facility with the equipment and had a lot of equipment, I could just do it. So I went ahead and made the imperfection, you know, basically on my own dime, and and that wound up getting into the Tribeca Film Festival, which really started a long lasting relationship we've had with them, and I think it showed that we could do the kind of slightly more elevated storytelling that was a bit more layered and a bit more of a genre mishmash of like, oh, there'd be comedic moments, but it's a thriller and it's slightly surreal. You can do all those things, and the audience is here for it. They love it. They don't want to be spoon fed the same cookie cutter recipe that they get from TV studios over and over again. They want people who take bolder chances, or are a little bit more rough around the edges, a little more ragtag, a little more punk
Yeah.
rock.
Yeah, I feel like also you can like kind of go in different directions than you would be able to with TV shows. You can go like a little bit further with a lot of these ideas.
Well, for sure, you don't have to worry about certain production issues. Like if you want to shoot on Mount Everest, that's really hard in real life, but in a podcast, it's no more expensive to have a scene in a submarine at the bottom of the Mariana Trench than it is to have it at a coffee shop. It costs the exact same amount of money.
Hmm.
It's probably easier to do the submarine scene, but the the ability to let your imagination run wild is one thing. So yes, for me it was about like, I love this medium and I don't have to wait for anybody to give me permission. I can just make something. The other thing that I think anybody who loves the art form would say, and as a more sort of stock answer, but is true, is like a book, the audience imagines these characters and these sets, these places for you, and they make sort of a customized version of your hero that's just right for them. And so the fact that the audience becomes your set designer, your production designer, your art director, and they do a perfect job to customize it to exactly what they want, I think is really thrilling. I like the lack of control that
Hmm.
you have when you know, create a character and don't show what that character looks like or what they're wearing.
Yeah, it kind of like distills it to like the rawest, just the voice. Like,
Yeah, and it leaves a lot of room for the human imagination to come in and fill that stuff in. And people who like audio drama like doing that. They enjoy that.
all right, thank you. Then my next question was, this kind of goes for both like the indie productions and like the bigger productions you've worked on, but how do you find a lot of the actors to collaborate with? Like, are they usually interested in the boundaries audio dramas can push? Like when I listen to Batman Unburied, Sam Witwer plays that super scary like serial killer. And like that's
Yeah,
not the type of thing I
yeah.
feel like he'd be able to do normally. So maybe he liked that idea.
Yeah, that's a good example of an actor who, uh, I mean, he was very clear from the get-go. He's like, I want to take big swings. I don't want to go for understated and grounded.
Hmm.
You know, I want to get kind of big with this. And so when it comes to casting, especially on the larger shows, we will there'll be a whole team involved. Say with Batman, there's some executives from Spotify who are really wonderful. Some execs from Warner Brothers, who are amazing. The guys from DC Comics are really cool. And then the writing team from David S. Goyer's Phantom 4, probably acting as showrunner, really kind of leading the charge. And with me as director, there's a lot of people making these decisions.
Hmm.
Really, me and Phantom 4 would go through every audition and present we'd have an internal discussion to discuss our ideas and what we wanted to kind of put together as a as possibilities. But early on, when you're talking about big names, everybody's just throwing out big names to see,
Hmm.
what feels like it might be cool of the moment. That's how we wound up with Winston Duke. That's
Yeah.
how we wound up with Coleman Domingo. Um, Hassan Minhaj, happened to be available when we were casting the role of Riddler for the first season of Batman Unburied. And then he was just so fun to work with, and somebody over at Phantom Four sparked the idea of doing a whole
Been
season
off.
with
Yeah.
him. Um, and that was really fun. He and I had a blast working on that. He's very physical as he's recording that stuff. He's all over the room.
Hmm.
So yeah, so casting is a big group effort on these bigger shows. Either way, we're using a casting team who, will go out and uh, particularly for the larger offers, those go out through studio executives who have personal relationships with the agents. For the rest of the sort of cast that are not the big tentpole names, we're using casting agents that will go out and put out casting calls through the various networks, and they probably know people and will suggest people. And for the mid-tier roles, you're talking about people that you've seen before or heard before. And then down sort of in the additional voices categories, it's actors you've never heard of before, but people that I may have worked with once or twice on various projects. So yeah, I mean, I it's a big process. It takes months to put together, and the whole time you're sort of playing Lego, because who you cast for your main roles will describe what you need to build out the world around them. Because you want voices that are contrasting, but you want actors that will gel. It's a finesse project to cast a big show like that.
Yeah, and I really liked all the cast of the ones I've seen so far. And for I saw Wolf at the Door spoke super highly of a lot of their indie work, especially Very Worst Thing That Can Possibly Happen. I was wondering what you feel like the process differs from bigger stuff, because and also I'm wondering if there's any specific inspirations for that one, because it felt very like Lynchian when I listened to it.
Yeah, there's some Lynch.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, that's another one of the indie projects that I wrote where really, to a certain extent, when I'm working on the indie stuff, I have to tune everybody out and just sort of follow my own dark magic wherever it goes. And uh, so I give myself a lot of freedom to make mistakes. And as a result, sometimes things suck or don't work. But that's kind of part of my process. With that one, we had a little money set aside to work on it, so we worked with a casting team we've worked with before on bigger stuff, and they helped us connect with um, all the actors that we wound up using. And for very worst thing that could possibly happen, there's a lot of different languages represented in
Hmm.
the show. So finding a cast that, where we had Isaac Gonzalez Rossi, who spoke English and Spanish perfectly, um, and 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 no, Antonia, Antonia, who is amazing and is a bunch of stuff in Europe. And her French is, obviously native, and her English is fantastic. And then all these Asian American actors who spoke either Cantonese or Mandarin and Russian. Yeah, there was a lot of language stuff that we had to handle on that one. That was complex.
All right, then the next question I got for Dust Chrysalis, was there any talk of ever continuing that story? Because it ends on a really interesting cliffhanger. Especially, I love the episode right before that when the AI and the Corey Hawkins are like debating about what it means.
Yeah, yeah, that was a great series, and really the very first thing that we did that sort of went big. And uh, Corey Hawkins was so good. So was Tony Collette. I mean,
Hmm.
you have to imagine, like, I I'd worked on some big things, but I'd never directed actors on that level before. I mean,
Hmm.
Tony Collette has an Academy Award. You know,
Yeah.
I'm some musician giving her notes. So it was pretty wild to suddenly have to be like, okay, here we go. We'll just get what we get and do our best.
Yeah, take it from the top.
Yeah. So it was it was really fun, and I think that the industry itself was in flux at that point. Like the studio that put Dust together did that really on a shoestring budget, much less than people would wind up spending on similar shows
Hmm.
2 years later and 3 years later. And so they were kind of, thanks to the producer on that show from Gunpowder and Sky, uh, who was fantastic and would just go for it, really managed to put together a much bigger show than they had the budget for. And uh, I don't think that they, in all the uncertainty of that time, this is during the pandemic, nobody was like, oh, yeah, we need to spend more money on bigger shows.
Hmm.
They were like, we probably need to spend less money and do more quantity and, hedge our bets and be safer. This was right in the middle of the lockdown. So everybody was terrified and nobody knew what the hell was going on.
I mean, also Chrysalis is like I would say feels a lot bigger in scope because there's narration too. It's not just people voices. You hear all about like the robots and cities and whatnot.
Right, right. Yeah, there's a thing in audio drama versus audio books, where people feel like narration's kind of cheating. I I don't feel that way at all. I love a good voiceover, and
Hmm.
I am, guilty of liking the version of Blade Runner with the voiceover. Sorry, Ridley Scott, I do. Um, it's corny, but it feels so good.
Yeah, just
And
make sure you don't tell him that. He wouldn't take kindly to that.
well, he can say that I'm a hack. I don't mind. It's like if you don't recognize what you like and give yourself permission to like it, you're fucked.
Hmm.
Never gonna make anything good. Because if you're fighting the fact that you genuinely like something, then how are you gonna fight for it in the face of all the doubt that's out there in the world? You know? So I personally am the like one of the next things that I want to work on is sort of an enhanced audiobook where I'm going to read it, but there'll be other actors involved, but I won't be doing the same level of sound design. It's more of a book
Yeah.
with voices than it is an audio drama.
So kind of like a dramatization of a book. It's like still the book, but it's other actors. And one.
Well, in my way of doing that, it will sort of wander in and out without letting you know where it's going or why.
Mhm.
So there was a famous writer named William S. Burroughs, and he and Brian Geisen developed something called the cut up method. And what they would do is these guys were doing lots of drugs. They would take their typed out sheets of manuscript and cut them vertically in the middle, throw them on the floor, reshuffle them, pick them back up, tape them together, and then type out what now existed. And so you wind up with these nonsensical pages that had half a sentence that made sense and then another half a sentence that made sense, but they didn't go together.
Hmm.
But these halves of sentences would on one side of the page. So you'd be reading a book, it'd be a normal narrative, and then all of a sudden you'd hit a section like this, and my brain just cracked when I hit that. I was like, it was already such a weird book. I'm thinking specifically of his book Cities of the Red Night, which is an incredibly prescient book about a government made virus that attacked homosexuals. I mean, way ahead of its time. And you'd be following this narrative, and all of a sudden you'd hit one of these cut up sections, and sense would go out the window, and your mind would just break. And so I personally I like the idea that, and I tried to do this a little bit with the very worst thing that could possibly happen, and like the really intense sex scenes, where you know it's like, whoa, that went really far away from just cute audio drama all of a sudden.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And something that would evoke a somewhat visceral reaction. Um, I mean, that's something that I find compelling. If I go see a rock concert and they get to that, last song, and it's so loud and so moving and you're really transported, those are feelings that I like from art, something that really shocks me into a new kind of awareness.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think one other question I had, this is one I've been curious about for a while, but I really liked the Seneschal a lot. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But
Seneschal.
thank
Seneschal.
Seneschal, thank you. And I love the cast in general. I really like how Snyder casts a lot of his stuff. And I'm kind of curious if that one was made like after the first movie or because they were shot back to back. So I don't know like when the timeline was. And then also I just want to ask a bit about the cast. Especially I love Jason Isaacs in it. He's got such an incredible voice in general.
Well, and I've worked with Jason Isaacs on multiple things, right? Because he was
Alfred.
Alfred, yeah, the butler in both the Batman shows and Riddler. So I've gotten to work with him a bunch, and it was actually I think I was the one who suggested when the whole team was kind of talking about casting at the beginning, suggested that maybe he play the king. Um, and Ella Purnell came into the discussion. I don't know who put her name forward, but it was a brilliant call because she's so um, her ability with words and her diction and her control of her breathing is really remarkable as an actor.
Mhm.
Very trained in the British sense. And so working with her, doing multiple accents and playing a robot version of
Mhm.
myself was such a pleasure. It was wild how capable she is as just in terms of the training that she's done. It's no joke. She's just a remarkably talented person, but she has put in the work.
Yeah, that whole
Um,
cast is really good.
the
Like,
whole cast is great. Alfie Enoch is just lovely.
mhm.
Our producer, he's Brazilian. Our producer, Chica Barbosa, is a Mexican Brazilian filmmaker who. So as soon as they were in the studio, they started going off in Portuguese. Like the whole vibe of the studio changed, and everybody was just having a blast immediately.
Yeah.
So it really, that was such a fun thing. Okay, so in terms of the way that the story came about, the Zach had had that idea brewing around his mind for a long time of I want to talk about the origin of they're called the Jimmies, these
The
robots,
robots, yeah.
and I want to talk about them like 500 years in the past, and I want it to be this sort of epic palace intrigue thing. That's what he had.
hmm
So he came to Netflix's podcast team with that idea. They pulled us on board. We brought in some outside writers. We wrote on it. Another writer was brought in later who had kind of more of a comic book background to do a pass on it. There were a lot of people working on those scripts um, by the time that they got finalized. During this time, Zach is in post production on the first film.
Okay.
So that's where he was. They had some sound design that they showed us. They had a rough edit. I think the edit at that point was still like 4 hours long, so they were still cutting it down. Um, and so we put it together over about 9 months while they were in post production, and then released the first film and were in post production on the second film. And in between, Zach did a master cut that was both movies as one film
hmm
that was like, again, 5 hours long.
Yeah, really.
And I don't know if that ever came out. Did it? I don't think it
He
did.
made like the director's cuts, and both of them are like 3 hour long each.
Okay, okay. So what they wound up doing is releasing this at the same time that they released that or made that available
Yeah, I
as
think around
sort of
that
a
time.
tied the audience over in between episode one and episode two of the
hmm
yeah.
Yes, that was also really cool, and that also has some narration. I mean, not quite as much as Crystal's, but as Peter Serafinowicz doing the great
Yeah.
introduction at the beginning.
Yeah, and that again, that's Zach. Like he was the one who came in really, after we had pretty much finalized the script and said, I think I want these introductory, like we had cold opens with the robot, but we didn't have these epic poems.
hmm
That's when he was like, oh, I want to bring in this comic book writer that I know or graphic novel writer that I know to bring in this. You know, that's just the way he thinks. Is like all of a sudden I want Homeric epic poetry to start each of these. Now that wasn't my particular call. I don't when I think of the youth of today and what they're into, I don't think Homeric epic poetry.
hmm
But he's not wrong. It sets a tone. It has a vibe, and there's certainly through Peter Serafinowicz's epic delivery, it has a gravitas and a weight that's really unique and feels magical.
Yeah,
Um,
I
so
mean,
it's another one of those situations where it's like you can love Zack Snyder or hate Zack Snyder, but he's got a point of view. And when I met with him to discuss these elements of the show along the way, he's excited and he's into
mhm.
it, and he has a real energized enthusiasm for a good idea that I think anybody would admire.
hmm Yeah, I've always been a fan of his. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I one thing I was surprised about is I kind of, I associate him with being kind of like a visual guy, but this Seneschal is basically all like dialogue, and I'm still impressed it works so well. Like it's kind
Yes. I mean, we thought the same thing. We were like, wow, this is going to be a very different world from his world.
mhm.
But really, we managed to, I think, infuse it with enough of that sort of uh, big performances, big, epic dramatic feelings, the loss of a perfect love, betrayal,
Hmm.
the death of the Mad King, that kind of, big colorful swashes of emotion that drive his work, that is visual.
Yeah, yeah. So it was such a good combination of like drama, like mythical elements, and again, yeah, I feel like everyone. It does kind of, yeah, you're right. It does give off kind of like a Homer like mythology vibe.
Yeah.
And then I guess my last question is, can you say what projects you're working on now or any other ones you have on the horizon? You mentioned the audiobook, but I'm curious, there's like another season of like Batman Unburied, another season of Very Worst Thing. Any ideas?
Well, we are in post production on a show that's another one of our independent productions that Winnie, my wife, Winnie Von Kemp, wrote, called The Doubles. And it's loosely based on Dostoevsky's novella, The Double.
Oh, that's cool.
And so that'll be out in spring of next year. It's a 9 episode uh, uh, limited series. And it's a really cool cast, very indie. Also, sort of following more in the footsteps of, say, The Imperfection.
Hmm.
There's comedic elements, but it's a thriller, and there's some sort of a dark and mysterious elements to it. I won't give anything away on that.
All right, well, looking forward to that. Can we assume it gets trippy?
Uh, it's fairly grounded, but
Really?
yeah. Well, I'll let you decide. It, and again, I don't want to give anything away, but a woman is working at a celebrity-owned wellness company similar to like Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, and she's an Asian American woman. She's really convinced that as long as you work really hard, people will like you and you'll succeed. And this glamorous, more elegant, more fashionable version of her shows up and steals her best friend, steals her promotion, and she's convinced is out to get her. And from there, she winds up joining a support group for other people whose doubles are ruining their lives.
Well, that does
And,
sound really interesting. Looking forward to
and
that.
it kind of unfolds from there.
Think you mainly want to stick with indie stuff for the near future. Do you have any other like more like franchise stuff in
Well,
the
we have a really huge project going on that we're producing and that I'm directing. That is a partnership between Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw and the Obama's Higher Ground
Oh, that's really cool. I'm a big fan of Jordan Peele.
that we're doing for Audible, and that is slated to be released 2026, but there's been some script rewrites that are pushing on our calendar quite hard right now. Um, I would suspect that as soon as I get back from the holidays, all of a sudden it'll be like, we gotta go. But we've been in the script writing and ideation phase on that for over a year now. So um, it's settling into shape where we can then go make it.
All right, well, I'm definitely looking forward to that. Thank you so much for being able to make time for this. Really enjoyed being able to talk with you about all these various projects, and hopefully, I can have you on at some point in the future when we hear more after there's more stuff happened.
Yeah, great. I love that.